himself.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is James Scott. I am an academic advisor with the TRIO Student Support Services program at the University of Pittsburgh. Our program works predominantly with first generation and low income students at the university. And I've been there going into 18 years now.
My name's Carlton Scott, and I'm an academic advisor in the College of Business Administration, and I've been at the University of Pittsburgh for approximately 21 years.
So when thinking about the topic of motivation, immediately, like there's a lot of things that went through our heads on what to do. And one thing that we do a lot of is talk about is a personality assessment. So I'm not sure if anybody's ever done the True Colors assessment before, but it's just one of several assessments, but one that we're in particular just helping to understand ourselves better can then help us understand others and what may be their motivations behind the things that they're doing, and just to better help us be able to interact with those that we're working with. So we are just choosing to kind of go into that today. So I'm going to just set up the PowerPoint that we have for that, and then we can dive into the True Colors. Okay. Does everybody see that?
We're seeing the presenter view right now, James. So we're seeing like your main slide and your next slide.
Okay. Let's see. Let's try it again.
So clearly the Zoom option was the, yeah,
That's
there we
good
go.
now.
All right. All right. Okay. So what is True Colors? You know, as we kind of alluded to, True Colors is a model. It categorizing personality types into 4 primary colors that designate behaviors and traits. The objective of utilizing True Colors is to facilitate deeper conversations and communications and understandings interpersonally and in the workplace. It also, you know, once again, helps us increase our understanding of ourselves. And I think hopefully by the end, you'll see how it can help to increase positive interactions and productivity. Some important things to understand about True Colors. Next slide. Some key concepts. True Colors is obviously, it's a metaphor. So the colors represent something else. Each person is a unique blend of the 4 colors. So one of the things to kind of think about is, you know, as you go along, what colors are predominant. Some people are very, you know, intently one color and low on other scales. So it's sometimes interesting to see what combination of colors that you do have. There are no good or bad colors. This is something that we stress consistently because depending on what group you're working with, it could seem like, well, if my predominant personality type is this color, that wouldn't be good where I'm working, or this wouldn't be effective for, you know, this place, and I can't be this. And so there becomes this color envy type thing that comes out. But the key that we always stress is that all colors contribute to the workplace or in relationships in unique ways, and it's important to understand how that fits. Also, there is a wide individual variation within the colors, and it's usually predicated on what the second color is, or third color, and the level there. Something that had to change when we were doing the online is we usually have everyone do an assessment to get a feel for what colors you actually are, and so we're just going to try to modify it in some ways, but hopefully as we go through, you'll be able to kind of pick that out. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into the colors now. There'll be somewhat, I will read a little bit, but I think it's important to kind of get some of the key characteristics here. So characteristics of the first color of orange are, orange people tend to, they like to be challenged. They're energetic, self-confident, and often risk takers. They desire change and variety, problem solvers, creative and inventive, and some other things are they're kind of the natural entertainers. They need to constantly be moving, and they kind of appreciate immediacy. It can feedback right away. The stressors for oranges. So we're going to look at, in each color, we're going to look at characteristics and stressors. Stressors for oranges are environments where there's too much responsibility immediately, redundancy, deadlines, rules and regulations. Being stuck at a desk is something that oranges really do not like. A non-negotiable imposed structure, so they can handle structure in some capacity, but when it's non-negotiable and it's very rigid, oranges don't tend to like that. Oranges might be those who don't necessarily want to sit and read every instruction and go in order when even putting things together. It's kind of a different process for them. And other things are hypercriticism. Oranges don't necessarily enjoy, even though they want immediate criticism. And then also just a lack of fun. Oranges need some type of engagement there. Okay, so that's the orange. As we go along, if you can, maybe you want to, if you have a piece of paper or something, or you just want to kind of think about it, think about which characteristics fit you the most. And if you're really thinking about it, it's the stressors which will tell you really whether a color is more predominant or not. Okay, so when you're thinking about the stressors, if you think those things that I was talking about really fit you, then that might mean that you're more that color than the other. Okay.
So next up is green. So green, people who are green tend to emphasize logic and reason over anything else. They love to analyze. They kind of sometimes live in the future. They're always they're really idea oriented. You may see a person who, before making a decision, wants to look at every angle before they actually make a clear decision on something. They're typically seen as serious, and like some of the stressors for green are not having enough independence, right? Greens like to kind of do their own things, and they feel like they've because they process and look at things so deeply, they know that they don't see the logic sometimes in having to go by certain rules and structures. They also emotional displays. So greens are typically more logic and logical and rational, and that's how they go through the world. So emotional displays sometimes can be uncomfortable, or in knowing how to actually handle those things. So also small talk. So if you're a person who, small talk really is something that you just try to get away from, greens typically like to have more serious conversations at times. And they also routine a lot of times gets to a green. They like to, unless that routine is something that's really highly effective, that they see, they kind of like to switch things up, and when they get more information. So that is so the typical, if some of these fit you, you see these things, or you probably see these in other people as well. So next color.
Okay, so blue. Blue is next, and blues are the mediators, and the mediators. They like harmony. They're often the optimistic people, enthusiastic caretakers. I think some of your blues are very cause oriented. They relate well to others, or they value that. They have a strong sense of empathy. They like to, even spirituality is a big part of blues sometimes. Peace, harmony, relationship building. They're often imaginative and cooperative. So they like to make sure that everybody is connected. So some of the stressors for blues are things like broken promises, too much negative criticism, people talking behind their backs, not discussing what is actually occurring, clock watching. Conflict is a big one that you see in blues that are stressors. Insincerity, lying, rejection. Let's see. So placing the system as a priority above people. So, in terms of looking at issues and trying to think about like how people are feeling about them, blues are often on there and not the big picture there. Also being constantly compared by others, not being evaluated as the individual, and too much conformity without outlets for individual expression. So those are just some of the characteristics for blue that are out there. So we can kind of move to the next color.
So the final color is gold. So gold love organization and structure. They can look at a big picture, but to them, the details are what is most important. They want to just know how something's going to happen. How's the structure going to happen? They don't typically like to dive into the overall big picture of things. So they also believe in rules. And so if hours are 9 to 5, then that's when you should be there, 9 to 5. Like if there's they also believe in right and wrong, right? There's just a right way to do things, and then it's a wrong way. And they also value having consistency. They have a strong sense of duty in their work or in their lives, and they also like examples of golds, or they love to create strategies for things. They love to have, they might have a lot of documents that detail how to do different structures in a workplace, and it's something that they really enjoy doing. So the stressors are just incomplete tasks. They really hate to see disorganization, and those that don't follow through on their particular assignments or things, just in life or in general, like they those are things that kind of stress them out. So just typically a lack of a structure, a lack of a detail is something that's really going to stress out a gold individual.
So at this point, we've just gone over the colors quickly. I was hoping to ask the participants to maybe type in the chat what you believe your top 2 colors might be, just so we have a sense of maybe who's in the room. So if you could you just maybe type in and just say what your top 2 colors are? Orange and blue, gold and gold. Excellent. So it looks like a good mix, and even primary and secondary colors there, green and gold, gold and gold, I see. Very gold, right? That's great. So now that you did that, I'm gonna ask one more. It's a trivia question. So what do you believe? What colors are the opposite colors to each other? So what two colors are opposites? Or what colors are opposites, basically? I'm just curious. I just want to see if anybody has the answers there. Gold. Gold. Good. Okay, so a lot of variations there. So so let's move forward to the next slide there. Okay, so here are the opposite colors of each other. So you have blues and greens and orange and gold. And it seems like the golds and oranges really know that the oranges and golds are definitely opposites. I think that, so this slide I find particularly interesting because this helps explain, I bet you we all can probably go back and kind of think about how this might explain a lot of our interactions. When we think about blues and golds, and if we're having a conversation about some issue, and then blues want to talk about maybe how the issue is affecting people, right? And how we can really be sensitive to those things, where greens might skip over the feeling part of it and just want to get to, all right, solving the problem, or being too intellectual about it, right? And often that dynamic right there can be seen as they could see greens as being callous, and greens could see blues as being too touchy-feely, things along those lines, right? And so the same thing with golds and oranges, when we talk about things like a time, for example, when we're thinking about meetings and golds who like to be on time, like to be set up and ready to go, and oranges who might have a looser thought about what time is, and so it could be seen as disrespectful, and to golds could see oranges as more disrespectful. Oranges might not understand why that is coming into play if you don't really understand the personality types there. So that's just a brief example. I mean, we'll talk about more of those as we go. So the next slide is going to talk about what percentage of the population is actually these colors. So we have oranges who make up 35 to 40% of the US population. Gold, of the world actually. Gold, 35 to 40%. Green, 12 to 15%. Blues, 12 to 15%. And within those categories, we have in greens, men typically 70% green, females 30%. Blues, that number is flipped there. Okay, so now what we want to do is, so what we would typically do is kind of go more in depth with this and explore kind of more activities related to that. What we want to do now, though, is jump into how something called the shadow personality. Okay, so what this is we have our personality types. When we identify what they are, we can all see what strengths we believe we have, and in many ways we believe that yes, we contribute greatly to whatever the project is. You know, when we looked at even the characteristics that we laid out earlier, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I see how I'm a great organizer, or you know, I see how I like to think about things in greater detail and things along those lines, right? So now the question is, how do others see us? So we have a couple slides to just kind of to point that out. So let's say oranges, for example. All right, so let's see how oranges see themselves. Oranges see themselves often as fun-loving, spontaneous, flexible, carefree, proficient, practical, good negotiators. They welcome new ideas, see many options, hands-on, do many things. So I'm sure all the oranges in the room probably see that in themselves. That's great. So let's see how others might see oranges. Irresponsible, flaky, goof off too much, disobeys rules, manipulative, not to be trusted, scattered, cluttered, uncontrollable, resist closure, indecisive, obnoxious, not a team player. Now, obviously, we know that that's not, these are perceptions, right? But it's important to understand how some of the things that we might see as strengths might also, how they might be perceived by others if we don't understand what their personality types are. And in many ways, like we said, when we looked at the opposites, it might be golds that are strong golds that are thinking of us that way. That doesn't mean it's true. It just means that that's how it might be perceived. And if we understand that, then we can look to kind of mitigate those understandings. Okay. So golds. Golds see themselves as stable, provide security, dependable, always have a view, efficient, realistic, decisive, the executive type, good planners, orderly, neat, organized, punctual, and goal-oriented. How might others see goals? Rigid, controlling, dull, boring, opinionated, system-bound, unimaginative, judgmental, bossy, controlling, uptight, predictable, and autocratic. Now, you know, the thing that I didn't mention before is that some of us, if we are strong in these colors, have probably heard these words when attributed to us in some ways. But once again, there are going to be certain personality types that would see us in this manner. And so that's just another way of kind of seeing that. Let's take a look at greens. Now, being a green, I'm sensitive to these things, but so greens, usually right, tough-minded, powerful, efficient, superior intellect, original, eminently reasonable, calm, not emotional, under control, able to find flaws, objective, seeking justice, firm-minded, and able to reprimand. All good positive things about greens there. So how might others see greens? Arrogant, heartless, ruthless, don't care about people, intellectual snob, unrealistic, eccentric, weird, cool, aloof, unfeeling, afraid to open up, critical, fault-finding, devaluing relational aspects, and then lacking mercy, unfair, unappreciative, and stingy with praise. And to be perfectly honest, you know, as a green, I know that's the perception that could be out there if you don't actually think about how it is that you're responding to something. Let's get to the point. And you know, why are we worrying about something that's not going to affect the bottom line? Or you know, but we have to be aware and say, okay, you know what, someone might be wanting to deal with those things, so let's validate that that's in the room. Let's do that before we go and move forward with it. So let's do it in a way that kind of encompasses how everyone might be. And so that's just one example of that. Okay, and finally, blues. Blues see themselves as warm, compassionate, romantic, idealistic, spiritual, works for cause, unselfish, empathic, affirming, a caretaker, promoting growth, likes to please people, sympathetic, great communicators, and wanting harmony. Others may see blue as over-emotional, bleeding heart, mushy, naive, too tender-hearted, easily duped, too touchy-feely, too nice, too trusting, smothering, living in the past, groveling, soft, talks too much, pushover. Once again, adjectives that some of us may have have heard or seen in the past. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through that and really kind of delved into it, I'm wondering if there's what feedback or thoughts would individuals have just related to this? What original thoughts do you kind of come to mind? And I guess we can kind of just open it up there to anyone who wants to unmute. And I know there was a question earlier too.
She's all over the place. I can't remember which colors were what, but the word flaky comes to mind. She's not real goal oriented sometimes. I'm not sure which color that would be, if that's who we're relating these colors to, or if it's to us. But
sounds like an orange characteristic that some would say towards an
yeah,
individual.
that was the first one, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
does anybody else see those characteristics within either interpersonal or work relationships?
Yeah, like the characteristic of every person or behavior it can be changeable through training, or it is a gene in his blood or her blood that he gets those staff wherever they are, and like whatever you teach them or train them, but they will get that stuff which is his color, not the other stuff which is not belongs to his color or personality or gene.
I think that I think your question's relating to whether how do we develop our personality types, and are they changeable through training and the development there? So there are a number of factors that so first, these historically, these personality types are Myers-Briggs. All of these personality assessments are basically rooted in these 4 different personality types. So those have been identified as like existing within humans. Okay, so how we develop those, right, can be predicated on a number of different things as we grow up. What we're exposed to, what type of thinking that we're exposed to, critical thinking, things along those lines. What I would say is that, for example, if you're in an environment, and let's say that you're in an environment that I can use an advising example. So there were blues who are in advising. They care. They want to work with students, build relationships, things along those lines. But there was technology that began to be introduced into the advising profession that made it so that you had to utilize this technology in order to be able to advise. And there were some advisors who could not adapt to the technology, and it happened to be the person. It was someone who actually used to do True Colors. So she was very sensitive to the thought that she was very blue, and that the profession was changing to where she needed more gold, and she needed to develop that gold. And if she couldn't do it, then she couldn't be an advisor anymore. And so she ended up moving on. But the point is, she knew that it's possible to develop your other colors so that you're able to interact within an environment.
You're and the purpose of these things, you're supposed to. The idea of doing these is to say that you want to be across the board able to interact with the different traits of each of the colors. So just as much as I'm right-handed, and that's my natural inclination to do everything right-handed, I can develop my left hand as well. And a lot of times, in this is a term when used with the Myers-Briggs type indicator sometimes too, is flexing, right? So at work, you may be a strong orange where you just deadlines and things aren't really, you don't really do that in your natural life at home, but you go to work and you have strategies and structures to help you be able to really be successful in the work that you're doing, right? So I just think that it's just to caution when we're in a role of maybe leadership, or there's a little like power dynamic that we don't. So in working with students and advising, like if I'm a strong gold and I know that what works best for me, and I know that it's been proven to work for me, that I can't be sitting across from a student and say, here, this is how you need to best prepare for your classes and study and appointments. And I need you to create a schedule, and I need you to bring this back. Like that's what, when we talk about motivation, right? That could be really demotivating to a student across from me because I'm not being aware of what their actual personality type is. I don't have an idea of that, but I'm just operating out of my own type. And so we have to be aware. That's why true colors is important, or other assessments is we have to know ourselves, but we also have to know that just because we believe something a certain way is not always the maybe the best way to do things. That we have to be able to be open to what those that are sitting across from us are, how they're operating. And then once we learn to work together like that, then we can produce a better product.
So were there other thoughts at all?
James and Carlton, I'm interested in whether you use these personality tests with any of the students that you're working with. Is it part of the sort of barrier support services that you offer to kind of help students understand themselves better and help develop the relationships between you and the students? Or is it more something that you've kind of focused on yourself and seen as something to think about, for the way that you work with people who may have different approaches to things?
Yes. Yeah. So we use this with our staff. We uses this True Colors and Myers-Briggs. So we're very versed in these things. So therefore, it helps us to operate better with each other. So the irritation that you feel, sometimes you can laugh it off as, okay, this is who this person is. But with students, we have a class. We bring these to students every year, and because whether they work in groups, whether it's in their clubs, whether it's in their classes, so they're working with each other. So we want them to be able to understand that the frustration or things that they're feeling with each other, that it's somewhat rooted in something, and we want them to build up their skills in other colors and other personality types as well. But also just going into their careers, we want to be able to prepare them for that as well, because they're going to see this when they walk into a workplace and not maybe understand that frustration or why they're having certain conflicts. So it is a very helpful tool that we definitely make sure to use with our students for those purposes.
And when so one of the biggest things for students that they usually the feedback is within their interpersonal. So when we're having discussions about this and we go further, they often talk about their interpersonal relationships, and even with their their color and how their parents might view them as flaky and aloof, and and so it's even that in terms of what their parents expect of them, what they're in their relationships, with significant others and things along those lines. Things that even where they often point to things where it's failed in the past, but then they understand wait, well, this is why I was always frustrated with this person, and they always wanted to do this, or they have friends who when it comes to studying. They know now that if they want to study, instead of being angry and upset with their roommates or something about not wanting to do it in the way that they do, they just have to then step aside and go somewhere else and not expect that their roommate's ever going to respect that how they want to work, because the roommate doesn't even may not understand even what it is. They may be thinking, well, why do you need to do that? Why do you need to, can't you just adapt to what I'm doing? And so with students, I often say that the burden is now on you. Once we do this, now the burden's on you to make sure that your relationships are not failing because of this dynamic, right? So now the first thing you could do is look at it and say, all right, is this what's happening here? And the relationship can be repairable because this is probably what the dynamic is. Now you can strategize on how to go about fixing it. So, yeah. Any other thoughts or feedback or questions? There was a question about traits, the big five personality characteristics, I think, or so the big five, there were personality traits. So I think this is more personality types. So those personality traits would exist within any type. So it doesn't, you can be an extrovert and also green and things along those lines. So it's within every color you can have the different personality traits there.
Who's done the MBTI in here before? Anybody done that? Myers-Briggs?
I did.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was just looking at that too. I'm a INTP for the Myers-Briggs, and so a green, blue, and I think comparing the two, it's helpful to have both like assessments to kind of see how they kind of flow within each other, because nobody would say that I'm that I have a feeler. So the blue is more the the feelers, the emotion, and so it confuses people when they say, oh wait, you have blue and that's your secondary color, because green is my top color, which is like, okay, logical, and I want to, but Myers-Briggs helps understand that no, I do understand emotion. I do have some connection to that, but where the Myers-Briggs may not show that side of things. So yeah,
So we're not locked into being cold and aloof or whatever
right.
these tests. I just remembered I was an introvert with the Myers-Briggs, and we were all back in the corner, the introverts, and then everybody else was down front. But
Right.
People change over time.
And
right.
So that's actually a bit, and I'll say this final comment is that the reason to use this assessment or a Myers-Briggs, we wanted to talk about that in relation to things like motivation and talking to students or tutoring, or like we tend to look at, so in our class, when we work with students, introverts, right, tend to, a lot of things aren't necessarily catered to introverts. So if we had to think about like, okay, if we want an introvert to talk, how do we do that? Oh, well, instead of just asking, hey, does anybody have anything to share? We would say, okay, take a minute, write down the answer to the question, and then we'd say, okay, does anybody have anything to share? And then the introverts would be more likely to share because they had time to think and process, and then they're more comfortable sharing, as opposed to just, hey, who wants to do the extroverts are always in there. Raise their hands and jumping in. So that's why we look at that as saying, who's across from us? How do they operate? I can't, you can give me a whole list of things and say, hey, do this and do this in this structure. And I'm like, okay, great, but that doesn't necessarily fit with me. Like I need another plan of action that can kind of fit with how I work. And so that's what we really wanted to impart by doing this, is saying that like it really is something to, and you'll become more aware. The more that you understand you, the more that you understand yourself, you start to understand others and where they're at, and it'll help you to really start to see how you can kind of work with other people and be most effective.
And there
Yes.
is a quick assessment that can be done, so you can even see what numbers you are. Because if it's really, really high, or in some areas, it's important to, it's good to know that at least, and then you can see that, yeah, I'm really low here, and what that means. And and I'll just say a last thing is just like, when we talk about how do you develop it, right? So those who have low orange, for example, might be really ones who don't take chances. Like instead of doing that vacation and and just kind of like leaving and joining this club, or they may not do it if they have a very low orange. And so that's something to where if you take the opportunity to just kind of say, you know what, I'm doing it, that it starts to build up that color, because you're usually not going to do that, but you should just you can take the chance to do it. So I think that's, once again, goes to the point of seeing where your colors manifest, and then just the world around you, kind of looking at it and seeing, trying to figure out whose people color is, but not necessarily acting upon what you think. just kind of looking at it, but not necessarily acting on that, because you don't really know. But it's just trying to be aware, at least. Okay. I think, are we kind of close on time here? Is that?
We still have up to 15 more minutes, but we don't have to use that time. If we're getting to the end of our conversation, that's okay too.
Can I just ask a question? If you wanted to take this test, where would you go? How would you proceed with that? The true colors test.
So the assessment, we would have had, if in person we had a paper copy, and then I have one to link.
Yeah.
So I have, I think I sent the material to.
I have it, James. I can actually I've got PDF copies of the assessments that you sent. I can put them into the chat if that would be helpful.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
I'll do that now. And then when we put this onto YouTube as well, when we upload it later, we'll put links to them as well, so that you can come back to them if you want to. So just give me a moment and I will be finding them and putting them in the chat. But if you have more questions while I'm doing that, go ahead.
So is there any other questions, thoughts, or observations?
Well, I know I said I was an introvert, but I keep popping in. So my student, she's very disorganized and she always forgets her homework assignments. So then I got her an assignment book to write them down, and it still didn't work. She's just all over the place. I thought, oh, this will be the cure if she has a little book. So, it's best if she dog ears the page she has to do, but it doesn't always work. I'm like structure, and she's just, so it's one of the problems that I'm trying to solve.
Can I add to that? We've done training. I went to some kind of training on trauma and how that affects learning.
Yeah.
And then there are disabilities and how they affect learning. And then there's personality type. And I think we get all of that.
Yeah.
So from what I got from this was I need to be aware about how I come across. And the rest of it, it's day to day, because it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I've recognized with learning more about personality types, it's helped me. It helps you in some ways not be as stressed, frustrated all the time, right? Like, so even though you may not get the result that you want from somebody, like, you can still attribute it to the more understanding we have about all of these things. It still helps a little bit to not, even though we want to see certain results and it still hits you, there's still that feeling there, but just having more understanding into that can kind of play into it. And sometimes, so if it's the study strategies thing, that's the example that I think about all the time, because like if you give somebody, because we had that in our office where somebody's like, yeah, I told him to do this, I gave him a planner, I told like it, but I can understand like why, like, yeah, that they don't know how to use, sometimes it's skills, right? So sometimes it's helping to just build up the skills to use the things that you're giving. So we take for granted that like I actually even know how to do that. So if somebody maybe like sits with me, looks at it, I can that's where what do we say, learning styles can play into it, right? So then okay, maybe I learn by you telling me, showing me how to do it at the same time, and then hearing it, right? So there's 3 styles in them, and so now when you give it to me, I'm going through it with you, and it's not just given to me to utilize, right? That I might be more apt to then use it more because I'm more comfortable with that. So that could be a way to go about it.
Okay.
I have put 2 files in the chat. Hopefully you all are seeing them. Let me know if you can't access them. And I've just noted everybody who's here so I can email them to you as well.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Anything else? Must
All
have
right.
to hold on. I see a question there. You must have to deal with issues of bias and related anger. Do colors help with this? Bias and related anger. Yeah. So if I could speak to that in terms of bias and the related anger. One of the things that we talk about, we apply true colors to race. There are discussions about race and politics and things along those lines, and it's very understanding personality types can really help to understand how people interact with these conversations. And so for example, when confronted with a really emotion-driven type issue, and you have a right. So let's just take somebody who might be very blue versus somebody who's green in these conversations. It's how whether somebody can hear something and immediately jump to being defensive or angry or upset about it versus, okay, let me think about this, what's actually happening, and I'm not going to be automatically, greens might not be automatically driven to being feeling emotional about it, right? They might think about it in a different way and analyze it differently. And so those are having more productive conversations about race and everything like that are directly correlated with the colors and even wanting to have the conversation itself. So yeah, I definitely would say that it's an effective kind of thing to understand, and it will help you to be able to have more effective conversations. That's another hour-long thing that we to talk about those issues there. Yeah, definitely. Anything else? Okay, well,
Thank you everybody for your time and attention. And yeah, if there is anything else or any follow-up, you're welcome to get in touch with us at any time. I think you have our information, or Roberta or somebody has that.
You could certainly get that information from your program coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James and
Thank you.
Carlton. That was really interesting. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll say something else.